Today I'm going to show you how to flush a tankless water heater. Now, there are tons of videos online of how to do this, but most of them either leave out some very important information or they're just telling you the wrong information. So I've compiled a complete list of everything you need to do step by step, and I'm going to show you everything right now. So here's what you're going to need. First, 2 washer hoses. They don't have to be color coded, but I got these cheap on Amazon. I'll leave a link for everything in the description. And you want to make sure they have the washers on the end. And I would recommend getting the plastic rubber ones just to be safe so you don't have to worry about corrosion. Next you'll need a pump. This is a 1/3 horsepower pump. This is probably a little bit more powerful than I need. But I also use this to clean my cold plunge, so this is what I have. They have these in many different strengths and sizes. You could get one that's 1/6 horsepower and you'd probably be fine. But you do want to make sure it does have one of these connections for your hose. So you connect a really easy hose from your heater to the pump. Next you need a clean 5-gallon bucket. You want to make sure you don't have any thin set or anything like that. You want a nice clean bucket because this is going to be cycling through your heater. So you don't want any kind of crud in that to actually be siphoned into your heater and like mess up any of the coils or anything like that. So make sure it's a nice clean bucket. And then I just have 2 pieces of PEX pipe, 3/4 inch, that I'm going to put in the bottom here. So then when I put the pump in, it isn't sitting on the bottom. So especially if you have a lot of sediment in your pipes or really hard water, you're gonna wanna keep it off the bottom of the bucket, because when this is sitting in here, it siphons from the bottom, right? So if this is sitting on the floor and you have a bunch of sediment in there, that's just gonna be sucking the sediment back into your water heater. So elevate it at least a 1/2 inch or so. This gets it, 3/4 of an inch above from the bottom. Highly recommend just getting a couple pieces of pipe or anything really. You could have, something that's not going to corrode or anything like that. But definitely recommend putting something in the bottom of your bucket to keep your pump off of the bottom. Last thing you're going to need is your descaling fluid. And you could just use white vinegar. You would need 4 gallons of that, and you just cycle it through, put 4 gallons in your bucket. I've chosen to go with this quick descaler, and I like this because it actually changes color when it needs more descaling fluid. So this will actually turn from red to orange, and that means you have a lot of scale buildup and you need to add more of this to actually help clean it. The other reason I like this cleaning agent is it actually has a metal protective agent in it. It's still non-toxic and biodegradable, but it just has that added bit of protection to help save your water heater after the clean. So today I'll be servicing my Rinnai water heater. If you want to learn how to install one of these, I have a complete video, and this is the RX 160i, and this is one of the newer ones, and it does have service alerts, so I've set it to give me an alert every 6 months. So this is the service soon that'll start popping up whenever you tell it to. There's also a service alert that means you're getting low flow or scale buildup, and if you see that, you definitely want to clean it. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off the gas. My gas here. There we go. Cross means it's off. And then we're going to power off the unit. But we're going to leave it plugged in because the cool thing about these new Rinnais is they actually have a descaling program built in. So we'll get to that in a second. First of all, we're going to take these 2 screws off. So you can see these 2 screws at the bottom here. And this will let us just get to the panel. And then there are just 2 clips at the top here. That'll come off. And then the front actually rests on a little lip here. So you pull it out and then up and then take it off. It kind of smells like Band-Aids. I don't know why, it smells like Band-Aids to me. Okay, so we got our inner unit here, you can see, and the first thing we're gonna look at is just our air filter. So we're gonna pull that out, and I don't really have any debris in there, but if you had debris in here, you wanna clean this. And since my unit is just taking air from my space here, I'm probably not gonna have much ever. If you were drawing air from the outside of your house, the fresh air intake, you're probably gonna get more debris and stuff in this air filter. But very important to clean this. You can even wash it, but make sure it's dry before you put it back in, because you don't want to put a wet filter in and run it with it being wet. So you can either scrape this with a brush if it's dirty, or you can rinse it, but make sure you dry it really well before you put it back in. All right, so now we're gonna go below and I'll show you some things on the bottom of the water here. First of all, if you don't have these flushing valves, very important, you can't do this service without the flushing valves. So you either have to have someone install it or you can install it yourself, but most modern units are gonna have this. Hopefully whoever installed it was nice and actually placed the flushing valves in a way that you'd be able to access them. Because you can see if these were turned, if this was turned, you know, right across my gas pipe, I would have a horrible time trying to connect that hose. So we got our cold water in here, so we're going to turn that off. Might need a wrench. So our cold water intake is off now, and then we're going to turn our hot water out off too. So there's no water coming in, and there's no water that can come out. Here are our flushing ports. Your flushing valve should be off. Make sure you have your washer in there, and then we'll connect our cold water intake. And then this should be tight enough that the washer is going to grab it. And then we'll connect the other side to our pump. So this is what's going to bring the cleaning agent into the water heater. And then our hot water side coming out, this is where the fluid is going to exit. Again, tighten enough so it grabs the in there. So that's just going to go in the bottom of your bucket here. So right now these are connected, but we're just going to use this as a drain line. They're both kind of going to be drain lines. So we're going to open up these servicing ports, which will be the smaller valve here, one at a time to let the water drain. All right, so we've got that one, and then this one. Now before we start any flushing, we're actually going to start by checking the water filter, the pre-water filter here. So this will probably be a little more than hand tight, so you're going to have to get a tool. You want to make sure you're careful here because this is plastic, so don't go cranking down on this. And also if you have anything below your unit, you know, shoes, anything like that, you don't want to get wet. You definitely want to move those things because you're going to get a little bit of water inevitably. So we're just going to loosen this. That wasn't bad. And this will also break the vacuum, so you're going to get water in your bucket after that. So don't be alarmed if you hear it draining. Alright, so, yep, a little bit of water here. Yep, so you'll wait until the water drains, and then you're going to want to check your filter. This just pops off here. You can see I've got just a little bit of grime here, but you want to check your filter. I've got just a little bit of buildup here, but nothing bad. If it had a lot of buildup, you'd want to kind of get with a brush in here and get that, but you're going to want to check this before and after you do the flush. So we'll do a little pre-check here and clean it out. Put the filter back in. You want to make sure the filter's in when you're actually flushing. And then for the Rinnai filters, there's actually just one way the filter can go in there. There's these two little nubs. I don't know if you can see that. So there's a little channel for the nubs to go into, and then it just turns to lock it in. So like I said, we're going to make sure you keep this pre-filter in when you're actually flushing. And then make sure it's tight. Now that we've checked our pre-filter and put that back, now we are going to add our solution to our bucket. Remember, I've got my pump with my 2 pieces of PEX here just to keep it off of the bottom. And I've got my cold side, my intake, going from my pump to the intake, and then my hot out just going back into the bucket, so that's how it's going to recirculate. So now I'm going to add my descaling solution. You want to dilute this 5 quarts of water per container, so I'm going to do just a little bit less than that. So if I need to add more, I need to add more. So we'll see how much it actually takes. Let's start there. So again, if this turns orange, that means you need to add more descaling fluid. About 4.5 quarts of water. All right, so now we're getting to the cool thing about the new Rinnais, is they actually have a program for descaling. Now, if you didn't have one of the Rinnais with a descaling program, they say you want to plug it in for 20 seconds and you'll hear it going, and then you want to unplug it. And that's going to open up all the possible ports in the system to get the descaler everywhere. If you didn't do that, you might be missing some of the areas that the descaler could go. So you could be missing getting some of the benefits of that. But this particular Rinnai and the newer Rinnais do have a program, and I'll show you how to get to that. All right, to get to the actual descaling program on a Rinnai, you're gonna actually go to the control panel here. So you can see button A and button B are labeled behind here. Button A and button B. So we flip this back here. So that's our button A, and that's our button B. We're going to push button B for 1 second. And then descaling comes up. Then we're going to push button A for 1 second. And descaling starts to blink. That means it is ready to go. So now we can plug in our pump with our descaling program ready to go, and a timer should start once we plug in the pump and it senses the water going through. So let's see here. There we go. See, it started at 60. This is really cool, I gotta say. There's no guesswork. It just tells you how long it needs. Gives a timer. And then on the out, make sure your flow is good. Coming back into your bucket. All right, so now we got our descaler program running. It is counting down on its own because it senses the water going through it. So now we're just gonna let it do its thing for an hour. So the program has a 60-minute cycle and it'll count down as long as there's water running through it. But you can let it go as long as you want. If you have really hard water or it's been, a couple of years since you flushed it, you probably want to do longer than 60 minutes. But just know that once you get past the 60 minutes, it's just going to go to this rinse code. But you can run it as long as you want. So I'm happy with how long this has run, so I'm going to unplug the pump and then we can move on. There we go, pump unplugged. Now the first thing we're going to do is actually turn off the cold intake servicing valve. So that's the smaller one up here. Again, you might need pliers. And there's little arrows of which way to go. Now we're going to unscrew the hose going from the pump. And we can actually take this hose off, and then I'm actually going to take the pump out. And then you're going to want to make sure you clean your pump just so there's no fluid or any of the cleaning agent left in your pump. Out of all the videos I watched, no one said clean your pump, so I would highly recommend you clean your pump after you do this. If you're using this kind of liquid and not the vinegar, if you put it in a white bucket so you can see if it changed colors. So not ideal using a blue bucket, but I think it did just fine. This is pretty new. So there are two ways you could do the flushing. You could leave this hose connected and just bring in a bunch of buckets, and then you keep switching out the buckets. I have a longer hose here that I have going to a drain, so I'm going to actually disconnect this hose and put the longer hose on so I don't have to keep switching out the buckets. But before I do that, I want to open up the filter port here just a little bit, so that creates an air gap. So then when I open this hose, there's not a bunch of extra fluid coming out. So I'm going to open this up, and hopefully most of the fluid, you can kind of hear it, is going to come out so I don't have a huge mess on the floor. All the gurgling stopped, so I'm going to screw this back in and then disconnect my hose here. Hopefully it's not too big of a mess. Oh, it's not horrible. Okay. So connecting this hose, it's going to my drain. And then I don't have to worry about switching out the buckets. Now that I have my hose connected, make sure it is going to your drain actually, that hasn't popped out since you screwed it in. With the service port off to the cold side, I'm going to open up my main port on my cold side, so fresh cold water is coming in, rinsing, and going out through my service port on my hot side. Again, you might need a wrench. And you want to do this for about 5 minutes. So there's no countdown for this one, it's just going to stay on rinse. And if you didn't have a long enough hose, you could just keep switching out the buckets, but if you do have a long enough hose, that's definitely the way to go. This is also a good time to check on your condensate drain if you have a condensing unit. So you can see mine goes from CPVC to this flex line. So just make sure if you had some gunk in there, you could put some vinegar in there to clean it out. All right, it's been about 5 minutes, and I'm gonna turn off the cold intake here. So definitely worthwhile doing this. I've seen some people, they just return the valves to normal and then just flush the system by flushing it through their house. I mean, why do that when you can just flush all that nasty stuff out here? So definitely recommend doing this instead of flushing through your whole house. So before we put everything back together, we have to check the water filter one more time just to make sure, because during the cleaning process, some debris might have gotten lodged in it, especially with it cycling over and over again. So we're going to loosen the water filter again here, and then you want to let it drain again a little bit so you don't get a ton of extra water coming out. You can hear it draining. If you just open it up right away, you're going to get a ton of water coming out, so give it a minute to drain.
One eternity later.
I'm gonna get some excess water, so it can't hurt to have a bucket under there. And then I showed you before, the filter's just held on there by the two little nubs going into the channel. So yes, we have gotten a little bit more crud, if you can see that or not. But definitely worth cleaning your filter after the flush is done. So we're gonna get all that out. If it's really gunked up, you can use a brush, but this is pretty clean. All right, once you got your filter clean, you're gonna put it back. Got the two little nubs, and it's just go back on here, and then turn to lock it in. And then make sure you check your O-ring, make sure it's in good shape. If you had any silicone lube, you can put that on there too. And then when you're putting this in, you don't want to go crazy. This is just a plastic connection. Just a tiny bit of pressure here just to snug it up. Now that our water filter is clean, we're going to close the service port for the outgoing hot water. So again, these have nice little labels on them. And then we can remove our hose here. So then you want to make sure you close the port first, because if you don't, you're going to get excess water coming out and leaking everywhere on you. And then you can go ahead and close your service port cover. Make sure you don't cross thread it. That one's closed, ready. All right, now we can open our cold intake. Go nice and slow here. You can also check, this is a good time to check if you have your water filter installed correctly. So go nice and slow, just let it fill the system. All right, crank this open. And then we're ready to open up our hot outgoing to the house. So again, go nice and slow. There we go. Now that all our ports are in their original positions, we can return the water heater to normal operation. Remember, this is still, if you have a newer Rinnai, it's going to still be in its descaling function. So to get it back from rinse to normal function, we're going to press the power button twice. You'll see end, and then it's off now. So let's turn on the gas. Gas is back on, and then just hit power. And there we go, and it's reset, so you don't have to worry about clearing out the code or anything. If you didn't, oh, I do have to clear out the code, okay. All right, now to get the service soon indicator off, we're going to hold the A button and then cycle through this to the 3A, that'll make it disabled. So now that everything's hooked up, we got the system reset here. We're gonna turn on the hot water spigot and then let it run a little bit. All right, I've got the hot water on upstairs and I'm gonna run this a little bit, and this is a good opportunity to check. You see there's this little window here, so we can check how the flame looks inside of the unit. So in my instructions here from Rinnai, you can see how the flame is supposed to look and then how the flame is not supposed to look. So we're looking for kind of a bluish flame. We don't want the yellow flames to extend down. So I'll see if I can get you a view of that. So here is inside the heat exchanger. You can see the blue flames. You don't see any yellow flames coming down, and that's what we're looking for. If you saw a bunch of yellow flames, you'd need to take that apart and clean that, because there's buildup that is preventing it from burning the way it should. Now that we've checked the flame, we're ready to put the cover back on. Remember, there's this lip at the top here. And then the two clips at the top. And then the two screws that go at the bottom. So once you get your cover back on, that's pretty much it. So remember, depending on if you have hard water or soft water, you're going to want to descale your unit every 6 months to a year. If you have an old unit or you're thinking about upgrading, I would definitely recommend checking out my video on how to install one of these bad boys. The Rinnai system is super easy to work with, and I really like that it had the descaling feature. I didn't know it had that before until I read the manual, but it really makes it pretty simple and straightforward. Go check out my video on how to install one, or if you want a whole house filter system with a descaler filter, check out that video. All right, that's gonna do it. Leave a comment if you have any other questions, and subscribe if this was helpful. Subscribe.